Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Today was the day he had been both anticipating and dreading for weeks. As he sat up in bed, running a hand through his tousled hair, his gaze fell upon the shopping bags tucked away in the corner of the room. They contained carefully selected items, clothes, shoes, and accessories that would transform him into someone entirely different. Someone he had always been curious about but never dared to become. With a deep breath, he swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up. His heart raced as he approached the bags, fingers trembling slightly as he reached inside. The fabric of a silky blouse brushed against his skin, sending a shiver down his spine. "You can do this," he whispered to himself, pulling out the garments one by one. He laid everything out on the bed, a knee-length skirt in a deep burgundy, a cream-colored blouse with delicate lace details, sheer stockings, and a pair of low heels. Each item represented a step further into uncharted territory, a world he had only ever observed from afar. Taking another deep breath, he began to dress. The stockings slid up his legs, feeling foreign yet oddly comforting. The skirt hugged his waist, and he smoothed it down, marveling at how different it felt compared to his usual attire. The blouse came next, its soft material cool against his skin. As he buttoned it up, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. The transformation was already taking shape, and he couldn't help but stare at his reflection. It was still him, and yet not quite. He turned away from the mirror, focusing on the task at hand. There was still more to do. He retrieved a small makeup bag from one of the shopping bags and set it on the dresser. Inside were various products he had researched and purchased, each one a mystery waiting to be unraveled. With shaky hands, he began to apply foundation, trying to remember the tutorials he had watched late at night when no one else was awake. The cool liquid felt strange on his skin, but as he blended it in, he watched his complexion even out. Next came the eyes. He carefully applied eyeshadow, attempting to create the smoky effect he had seen in magazines. It took several tries and a fair amount of makeup remover before he was satisfied with the result. Mascara proved to be a challenge, but after a few close calls and near pokes to the eye, he managed to darken and lengthen his lashes. Lipstick was the final touch. He chose a shade of red that complemented the skirt, applying it carefully and blotting his lips together as he had seen women do countless times before. When he finally looked up at his reflection, he barely recognized himself. The person staring back at him was softer, more delicate. His features, once angular and masculine, now appeared almost feminine. It was a startling transformation, one that left him feeling both exhilarated and terrified. He took a step back, taking in the full effect of his outfit and makeup. The heels added a few inches to his height, forcing him to stand differently, to move with more grace. He practiced walking around the room, wobbling at first, but gradually finding his balance. As he grew more comfortable in his new skin, a sense of excitement began to build. He had done it. He had taken this first crucial step into a world he had only ever dreamed about. But now came the real challenge, venturing outside. The thought of leaving the safety of his apartment made his stomach churn. What if someone recognized him? What if people stared or, worse, confronted him? He paced back and forth, debating whether he should just take it all off and forget about this crazy idea. But then he remembered why he had decided to do this in the first place. It wasn't just about satisfying a curiosity. It was about embracing a part of himself he had kept hidden for far too long. He deserved to explore this side of his identity, to see where it might lead. With newfound determination, he grabbed his purse, another unfamiliar accessory, and headed for the door. His hand hesitated on the doorknob for a moment before he summoned the courage to turn it. The hallway of his apartment building seemed to stretch on forever. Each step in his heels echoed loudly, making him wince. He held his breath as he passed by his neighbors' doors, praying that no one would choose this moment to step out. Finally, he reached the elevator. As he waited for it to arrive, he caught his reflection in the polished metal doors. The person looking back at him was a stranger, yet somehow familiar. He straightened his posture, lifted his chin, and tried to project an air of confidence he didn't quite feel. The elevator dinged and the doors slid open. Empty. He let out a sigh of relief and stepped inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. As the elevator descended, so did his heart rate. He could do this. He would do this. When the doors opened again, he found himself facing the lobby. A few people milled about, some checking their mailboxes, others heading out for the day. He took a deep breath and stepped out of the elevator, willing himself to walk naturally despite the unfamiliar shoes. No one gave him a second glance as he made his way across the lobby. It was both a relief and slightly disappointing. Part of him had expected gasps of shock or disapproving stares, but reality proved far less dramatic. As he pushed open the front door and stepped out onto the sidewalk, the bustling city greeted him. The noise, the traffic, the people rushing by, it all seemed amplified in his heightened state of awareness. He stood there for a moment, taking it all in, feeling both exposed and invisible at the same time. His first destination was a nearby nail salon. He had made an appointment the day before, using a fake name and speaking in a softer voice than usual. As he walked, he focused on putting one foot in front of the other, trying not to wobble or draw attention to himself. The bell above the door chimed as he entered the salon. The smell of nail polish and acetone filled the air, and the sound of quiet chatter and humming nail dryers created a soothing atmosphere. A young woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. He nodded, clearing his throat before speaking in the softer voice he had practiced. "Yes, under the name Emma." The receptionist checked her computer and nodded. "Right this way, Emma. Tina will be taking care of you today." As he followed her to a manicure station, he couldn't help but feel a thrill at being addressed by his chosen feminine name. It made the experience feel more real, more authentic. Tina, a petite woman with bright blue hair, greeted him with a warm smile. "First time here?" she asked as he sat down. He nodded, suddenly feeling nervous again. "Yes, it's my first time getting my nails done professionally." "Well, you're in for a treat," Tina said, gently taking his hand and examining his nails. "What were you thinking of today? Color? Design?" He hesitated, realizing he hadn't thought that far ahead. "I'm not sure. What would you recommend?" Tina's eyes lit up at the opportunity to offer suggestions. She pulled out a color wheel and began pointing out different shades. "With your skin tone and outfit, I think a deep red would look stunning. Or if you want something more subtle, we could do a French manicure." After some deliberation, he decided on the deep red. As Tina began working on his nails, he found himself relaxing into the experience. The gentle filing, the soothing hand massage, the careful application of polish, it all felt wonderfully indulgent. As his nails dried under the UV lamp, he caught sight of his reflection in one of the salon's mirrors. The person looking back at him seemed more confident now, more at ease in this new skin. He smiled, and for the first time that day, it felt genuine. With his nails done and dry, he paid for the service and stepped back out onto the street. The weight of the unfamiliar shoes and the constriction of the skirt no longer felt so strange. He walked with more assurance now, his painted nails adding an extra touch of femininity to his movements. His next stop was a small cafe he frequented in his male persona. It was a risky move, but he wanted to see if anyone would recognize him. As he entered, the familiar scent of coffee and freshly baked pastries enveloped him. He approached the counter, his heart pounding. The barista, someone he had chatted with many times before, looked up with a polite smile. "What can I get for you today?" There was no spark of recognition in her eyes. He ordered his usual latte, speaking softly, and waited to see if she would make the connection. But she simply nodded, took his payment, and began preparing the drink. As he waited, he scanned the cafe. A few regular patrons were there, engrossed in their laptops or conversations. None of them gave him a second glance. It was both a relief and slightly surreal. With his latte in hand, he chose a table by the window. Sitting down carefully, mindful of his skirt, he took a sip and gazed out at the passing pedestrians. For the first time, he allowed himself to relax fully into his new identity. As he sat there, sipping his coffee and people-watching, he began to notice things he had never paid attention to before. The way women adjusted their clothing, the subtle differences in how they carried themselves compared to men. He found himself unconsciously mimicking some of these behaviors, crossing his legs at the ankle, tucking a strand of hair behind his ear. Time passed, and he realized he had been sitting there for over an hour. The initial nervousness had faded, replaced by a growing sense of comfort and even enjoyment. He was doing it. He was out in public, presenting as a woman, and the world hadn't come crashing down around him. As he stood to leave, he caught his reflection in the cafe window. The person looking back at him seemed more natural now, less like a costume and more like another facet of himself. He smiled, feeling a surge of confidence as he stepped back out onto the street. The rest of the day passed in a blur of new experiences. He window shopped, admiring clothing and accessories with fresh eyes. He visited a bookstore, browsing the fiction section and relishing the feeling of being treated like any other female customer. He even gathered the courage to try on a few items in a boutique, marveling at how different clothes felt and looked on his transformed body. As the afternoon wore on, he found himself in a small park, taking a moment to rest his feet and reflect on the day. Sitting on a bench, he watched children play and couples stroll by, feeling both part of and separate from the scene around him. It was then that his phone buzzed with a text message. His heart skipped a beat when he saw it was from his fiancée, Amanda. They had discussed his desire to explore cross-dressing, and she had been supportive, if a bit uncertain. But this was the first time she had reached out to him while he was fully dressed as a woman. "How's it going?" the message read. "Are you okay?" He smiled, touched by her concern. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he considered how to respond. Finally, he typed, "It's going well. Better than I expected. I feel different. Good different." Her reply came quickly. "I'm glad. Do you want to meet up? I'd love to see you." His heart raced at the thought. Meeting Amanda like this felt like crossing another threshold, one that both excited and terrified him. After a moment's hesitation, he replied, "Are you sure? I don't want to make you uncomfortable." "I'm sure," came her response. "How about dinner? We could invite a couple of friends if that would make you feel more comfortable." He considered this. The idea of facing not just Amanda, but their friends as well was daunting. But perhaps having a small, supportive group would be easier than a one-on-one encounter. After a deep breath, he typed, "Okay, let's do it. Where should we meet?" They settled on a restaurant, a cozy Italian place they frequented. Amanda would invite their friends, Rachel and Michael, a couple they had known for years. As he made his way to the restaurant, he felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The sun was setting as he arrived, casting a warm glow over the city. He paused outside the restaurant, taking a moment to collect himself. Through the window, he could see Amanda, Rachel, and Michael already seated at a table. They were chatting and laughing, seemingly at ease. He took a deep breath, straightened his blouse, and pushed open the door. The hostess greeted him with a smile, and he managed to say, "I'm meeting friends," in his practiced, softer voice. As he approached the table, he saw the exact moment when his friends noticed him. Amanda's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and something else. Pride, perhaps? Rachel's mouth formed a small O of astonishment, while Michael blinked rapidly, as if not quite believing what he was seeing. Amanda stood up, a warm smile spreading across her face. "You look beautiful," she said, pulling him into a hug. The familiar scent of her perfume was comforting, grounding him in the midst of this surreal experience. Rachel recovered quickly, standing to hug him as well. "Wow, you look amazing. I love that blouse." Michael, ever the jokester, grinned and said, "Well, I have to say, you've got better legs than me in a skirt." The tension broken, they all laughed and sat down. As they perused the menus, he could feel their curious glances, but there was no judgment in their eyes, only support and perhaps a touch of fascination. The waiter approached, and he felt a moment of panic. This would be the first time he'd have to speak to a stranger with his friends present. But as he ordered his meal, he was surprised to find his voice coming out steadier than he expected. As they waited for their food, the conversation flowed naturally. His friends asked questions about his day, genuinely interested in his experiences. He found himself opening up, sharing the mix of emotions he'd felt throughout the day. "I was so nervous at first," he admitted, twirling a strand of hair around his finger, a gesture he'd unconsciously adopted. "But as the day went on, I started to feel more, I don't know, authentic. Like I was expressing a part of myself that had always been there, just hidden." Amanda reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. This took a lot of courage. Rachel nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. And honestly, you carry yourself so well. If I didn't know you, I never would have guessed." She trailed off, but he understood what she meant. It was a compliment, albeit a complicated one. He smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "Thank you. That means a lot." As they ate, he found himself relaxing more and more. The initial self-consciousness faded, replaced by a sense of acceptance and even joy. He laughed at Michael's jokes, engaged in a heated debate about movies with Rachel, and shared tender glances with Amanda. By the time dessert arrived, he felt like himself, not the male version or the female version, but simply himself in all his complexity. The clothes, the makeup, the painted nails, they were expressions of his identity, not a costume or a disguise. As they were finishing up, Michael leaned in with a mischievous grin. "So, does this mean we get to take you shopping now? Because let me tell you, there's this pair of shoes I saw the other day that would look fabulous on you." They all burst out laughing, and he felt a surge of affection for his friends. Their easy acceptance, their willingness to embrace this part of him, meant more than he could express. As they left the restaurant, stepping out into the cool night air, Amanda slipped her hand into his. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. He thought for a moment, trying to put the swirl of emotions into words. "I feel free," he finally said. "Like I've unlocked a part of myself I didn't even know was caged. And grateful. So grateful for you, for our friends, for this experience." She squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with emotion. "I'm glad. And I want you to know I love you, all of you, whatever form that takes." As they said goodbye to Rachel and Michael, making plans to meet up again soon, he felt a sense of possibility opening up before him. This day had been a revelation, a step into a new world of self-expression and acceptance. Walking home hand in hand with Amanda, he realized that this wasn't an endpoint, but a beginning. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt, questions to answer, both for himself and others, but he felt ready to face them, buoyed by the love and support of those closest to him. As they reached their apartment building, Amanda turned to him with a smile. "So, what's next? Are you going to make this a regular thing?" He considered the question. The thought of exploring this side of himself further both excited and frightened him. But after today's experiences, he felt more confident in his ability to navigate this new terrain. "I think so," he said slowly. "Not all the time, but sometimes, when it feels right. Is that okay with you?" Amanda's smile widened. "More than okay. I love seeing you so happy, so comfortable in your own skin. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you." They entered the apartment, and as he kicked off the heels that had carried him through this transformative day, he felt a sense of coming home, not just to the physical space, but to himself. He looked in the mirror, taking in the blend of masculine and feminine elements that made up his current appearance, and smiled. This was him. All of him. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly, completely whole. The next morning, he woke up feeling different. The memories of the previous day swirled in his mind, a mix of exhilaration and lingering nervousness. As he stretched and got out of bed, his gaze fell upon the clothes and makeup scattered around the room, evidence of his adventure into a new identity. Amanda was already up, the smell of coffee wafting from the kitchen. He pulled on a robe and padded out to join her, unsure of what to say or how to act. But when he entered the kitchen, she greeted him with a warm smile and a steaming mug of coffee, just like any other morning. "Sleep well?" she asked, leaning in to kiss his cheek. He nodded, grateful for the normalcy of the moment. "Yeah, I did. Though my feet are killing me. How do you wear heels all day?" Amanda laughed. "Years of practice, my dear, and a high pain tolerance." As they sat at the kitchen table, sipping their coffee, he found himself reflecting on the previous day's events. The initial terror of stepping out in public, the gradual building of confidence, the dinner with friends. It all seemed somewhat surreal in the light of day. "So," Amanda said, breaking into his thoughts, "how are you feeling about everything?" He took a moment to consider the question. "Honestly, a little overwhelmed, but in a good way, I think. It's like I've opened a door I didn't even know was there, and now I'm not sure what to do with all this new space." She reached across the table and took his hand. "That's understandable. It's a big step you took yesterday. But remember, there's no rush. You can explore this at your own pace." He squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of gratitude for her understanding. "I know, and thank you for being so supportive. I don't know if I could have done this without you." They spent the rest of the morning talking, discussing his feelings and experiences from the day before. Amanda listened attentively, asking questions and offering support. As they talked, he felt some of the confusion and uncertainty begin to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of clarity. "I think," he said slowly, "I want to continue exploring this. Not all the time, but maybe once a week or for special occasions." Amanda nodded encouragingly. "That sounds like a good plan. And if you ever want to go out together when you're dressed up, I'd be more than happy to accompany you." The offer touched him deeply. "I'd like that," he said softly. Thanks for watching. Check out Patreon if you want to have early access to the other parts. If not, it will be online in a couple of days.